Inside of the Swift network, to be able to even send a message to like from bank to bank to communicate about an upcoming payment, that costs money. It costs anywhere from like a cent to like 17 cents if it's going international, just to send a message about a payment. People that have like, 100 different banking relationships across the world in different places, they could use Bitcoin and Lightning to settle internally. We see a lot of people being very interested in allocating a percent of like a corporate treasury into a Lightning node and trying to earn, routing fees and things like that on it. There's so much that is unknown inside of Lightning, like inside of a node, and like what is happening for your given node. We want to like find what those weird things are and just bring them to the surface. Being able to use your capital more efficiently helps make the payment success rates better. Ultimately, at the end of the day, what we want to enable is folks to be able to plug in Lightning into what they're doing just the same as they would plug in like any other traditional piece of software.
Krizek is the CEO and founder of Voltage, a full-service Lightning infrastructure provider. In our conversation, we discussed Voltage's latest product, Surge, and the real-time insights that it offers for node operators. We discussed why Graham believes every company will be a Lightning company, and we also reviewed the progress that the Lightning ecosystem has made over the last couple of years. If you enjoy this show and if you learn something new, the best way to show your support is by sending in sats over the Lightning Network. You can use any Podcasting 2.0 app. There are dozens of them out there, but my favorite one to use is Fountain. Before we get into today's show, just a quick message from our sponsors. Today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the premier provider of Bitcoin and Lightning node infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Stackwork. And Stackwork is a Lightning-powered transcription tool that takes the best of AIs and humans to create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. We'll have more from Voltage and Stackwork later in the show. Graham, welcome back to the show. You were on one of the early episodes, so early listeners will remember this one. I believe it was episode 13, way back in January of 2022. But for the new listeners here who have not heard you, talk to me a little bit about what Voltage is. We can start off with just a brief background for the new listeners, what Voltage is, and share the target customers you're building products for.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's great to be back. I'm glad we're getting to do this again, and I think there'll be a lot of fun things to cover this time. So, my name's Graham. I'm founder and CEO of Voltage. I guess to kind of start why I started Voltage in the first place is I've been around Bitcoin for like 10 years, and I wanted to start using Lightning and starting going heavy in the Lightning space, but that was like 2018 or so. There was like not like the Umbrals and the Start 9s and all those devices weren't out yet. Like your only option was to compile like LND on your own like computer or Raspberry Pi or something and try and use it that way. And it was the whole process was like really horrible. And it was like, well, yeah, no wonder no one's using this. It's so hard to actually get your hands around it. And I think Breeze might have been around it. I can't remember, but it was like nothing was like that accessible. And so I wanted a service I could just like spin a node up, just have it be created, have everything ready to go, and then I could just start playing with it and using it much quicker than doing everything myself. So that was kind of the idea for Voltage and why I created it in the first place. And so, what Voltage is today, it's a full service infrastructure platform for Bitcoin and Lightning. And so we help customers, particularly businesses that want to incorporate Bitcoin into the Lightning Network into what they're doing. We help them with actually operating nodes, hosting nodes. We help them with liquidity, observability, all of the pieces that they need to start integrating Bitcoin and start and putting it into their products and services is what we do. So we come in, from some companies are existing Bitcoin companies that already have an understanding of what it is. They just need help getting up and running. We all the way into like traditional fintech companies that have no idea what Bitcoin and Lightning is. They heard that it's this great payment network. They want to start getting the advantages of it. We can help on like even starting in the education realm and then working up into like, the infrastructure of like, here's how you actually would go and create it. So we're just trying to solve the problem of making all of this technology very composable, very easy to use, and being able to allow people to build the experiences that they're imagining without having to do everything from scratch all the time.
Very cool. Now, you use the phrase full service infrastructure provider when talking about Voltage. And, in the Lightning industry, many have heard of the term of an LSP or Lightning Service Provider. are these terms interchangeable, or do you see that maybe over time there's a splintering going on where some companies are going to be focused on certain subcomponents of Lightning infrastructure, and you guys are kind of taking a full service approach?
Yeah, that's actually a great question that I've wanted to clear up more so recently because the term LSP has really, I think, gotten conflated. It's just gotten like people define it in different ways. The way that I interpreted it as the initial, I think Roy from Breeze was the person that coined that term originally, which I think was LSP was Lightning Service Provider. It was very much focused on the liquidity aspect of like Breeze had a node, they would open up a channel into the end user's mobile device to facilitate payments. And so it was very much focused on liquidity, but it was called a Lightning service provider. When people think about Lightning service providers today, I think that it has kind of blown up into like all of like custodial Lightning are like LSPs now, and also like liquidity providers are LSPs. And like it's kind of LSP seems to be anyone that is doing something inside of Lightning or providing it as a service. And so I kind of, that's fine if we want to define it as that. But I think, the way that I think about LSP is more on like a liquidity service provider, which is someone that is specifically, it's a service that is focused exclusively on liquidity and liquidity services. So I guess it depends on how you define it in that realm. Like if a Lightning service provider is just someone that offers Lightning, as a service, like we do that inside of our infrastructure of hosting nodes and operating nodes, and then all the way into a liquidity service provider, which is what we do as well. We have an LSP that it is a service that is made specifically for opening and managing channels that we can dive into more on that product specifically. But we also handle the liquidity aspects specifically as well. So it depends on how you define the term, whether it's this all-encompassing or more specific definition. We kind of fall into both categories. It's just when people say LSP, I see on Twitter and things like that, I think that people use it in different contexts over time. So I guess I didn't really push it in a particular direction. When I use LSP, I think very specifically on the liquidity and not an all-encompassing definition. So the way that I define LSP is more on the liquidity specific front.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you for clearing that up. And so, we have a liquidity service provider, let's call it, and then we have all these other things that you can manage and all the other infrastructure that comes along with running a Lightning business. Can you maybe touch on some of the other components outside of liquidity that Voltage helps folks with?
Yeah, definitely. So, like the core, piece that you need to start with is a node. So you have to, to be able to transact inside of the Lightning Network, you have to have a node, or you have to use someone's node. The node is the way that the protocol, the node, everyone talks to each other and facilitates the payment. So that's really step one, is working on that, having a strong foundation inside of your node and being able to have a server that is always online, well connected, being backed up, all of those things. And that's a service that Voltage provides, as just providing that infrastructure layer as a step one. And then we also have a new product called Surge, which we'll talk more about, that is very focused on the data and observability layer. So giving these companies, anyone that's trying to transact inside of Lightning, the full visibility of what's happening in your node. So being able to see your payment channel, see your transactions, look at issues, being able to get alerted of those issues, everything that you would need to know. Like, when companies are, used to deploying applications inside of, AWS or Datadog, using Datadog or like DigitalOcean or any of those services, all of that stuff is kind of right there in your face and it's just very easily accessible. And so we're trying to provide that same thing of giving them that level of access to the data. And then finally, the liquidity, being able to facilitate those payment channel creation and management for customers, so they aren't always the ones that have to maintain all of the liquidity at all times and monitoring and all those things. We either help, augment them in managing that, or just, we have tools that help them manage it as well. So, and then finally, there's the integration piece. So we have a full suite of like APIs and some automation to help actually manage and integrate the deployments that our customers have. So when a customer is trying to add Lightning into their products and services, Lightning is a very unique protocol, but they don't have to understand all of the uniqueness. It's the LND APIs are very very straightforward. They have a lot of documentation and SDKs around them. So we help customers in integrating the APIs of our services into their products as well, so they can really have a seamless experience. We ultimately, at the end of the day, what we want to enable is folks to be able to plug in Lightning into what they're doing just the same as they would plug in like any other traditional piece of software. We don't want it to be this weird, ugly, thing that they have to really understand in a new light. We want to make it a very seamless experience. So that's where we try and we see with the infrastructure, the data, the liquidity, and the automation and the APIs, that's the stack that needs to exist to make that a nice experience.
Right. So let's double down on Surge here. Can you talk to me about what does this solve for a customer in terms of like time savings? Is that the biggest kind of like headache right now for people who aren't using Surge to now come over to Surge and go, okay, we'll use this, save a bunch of time, and be able to like automate our infrastructure? Is that the main kind of value prop?
Yes. Yeah, it's time savings like via visibility. So like one of the like things that we would hear from our customers a lot is they're either when you're operating inside of Lightning, all of the data is on your node, and you need to either like look at your transactions to find a payment failure, why did it fail, what happened, or you need to see what channels are online, what channels are offline, what are the issues there, and also just reconciling payments. Your finance team probably needs to know what's happening inside of the node, so they need access too. And so what we saw customers doing a lot of is everyone's writing those tools to do that over and over and over again in their own ways. And so they're spending a lot of engineering time writing their own software to try and solve this problem. And so we saw it as a big, we saw everyone repeating the same problem over and over and doing it in like very, not great ways where it's not comprehensive. It's very, specific and niche. And so we saw it as an opportunity for us to go and build a really nice product and being able to remove that burden from customers of having to do these things themselves over and over again. And so, so it's one, the time savings of starting from scratch and having to build all of that stuff yourself. And then two, once you're deployed and operational, being able to give you very detailed, specific insights and recommendations on what to do. So if a channel is offline, we surface that super high level. It's obvious. And seeing payment failures, being able to look into a payment failure, where did it fail in its path? Like, what are the reasons? All of those things. So you can go and know exactly why a situation is occurring rather than having to go like look through a bunch of logs, look at, the command line, find all of these different areas and combine the data together. We want to present it in a really straightforward way so people can just, instantly see what is the issue or what are they trying, what is the thing that they are looking for, and just presenting it to them in the most seamless and straightforward way, instead of, historically it's been a very convoluted method of retrieving those kinds of data and insights.
Right. Okay. So now it's solving a lot of problems for existing customers. What about the unlock of new customers? Can you speak to maybe conversations you've had with folks who are not yet integrated on Lightning, who have considered it but have not kind of taken that first step? Does Surge solve any problems for that cohort of users?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, that it does for a couple of reasons. Like one, what I was kind of mentioning earlier is like, well, I guess we talk with a lot of like, we're working in trying to get more traditional fintech companies inside of Lightning, because we think it has a lot of benefits for not just this Bitcoin space that, we all understand what it does, how it works. It's great. There's a lot that it can do outside of our kind of bubble inside of Bitcoin and apply more traditionally. So when we're looking at servicing customers like that, they expect these kinds of out of the box tools. They don't want to have to, if we're trying to talk to someone and say, you need to integrate Lightning and you need to write these 4 different applications to make it sensible for your organization to use it, that's going to be, they're going to look at me like I'm crazy, and they're going to say no way. And so we know that they expect a certain level of tools and services that are just off the shelf that they can just start leveraging to satisfy integrating Lightning. And so that is a way that we service new customers, in that it's providing exactly that. When we have like the infrastructure, we can run the node, and then we also give you this full visibility into everything that's happening. Your finance team can get access so they can feel comfortable all of the transactions that are happening. Your engineering team can look at all of the channels and get alerted of the issues and all of those things. So it gives these more traditional players an out of the box solution that really solves their needs in a way that's not so crazy and different than what they're already doing. So it helps a lot in being able to bring on these new customers.
Right. Are there any missing pieces that still have yet to be built in the Lightning space that, to a customer who is not in the Bitcoin and Lightning space, they say, we need that before we can even consider building on Lightning? And any kind of like new things that may be on the roadmap for Voltage?
Yeah, I mean, like we see a lot of there's a lot that can be done like around like security and auditability. So that's something that we see. When you have a node, you need organizations generally, especially when you think about compliance like SOC 2 and those really strict like security protocols that need to be followed. You need to have sort of a full audit log of what is happening in the node at all times, who's doing what, traces of like all of the payments and those kinds of things. And so we do see that as being requirements, which are things that we are there's a lot more that we're adding to Surge. It's definitely not in its final state, so there's a lot that we can add in to make it much satisfy those requirements much easier. So we can have a customer that's coming to us saying, hey, we want to integrate Lightning, but we have all of these requirements that we need to meet. And our Surge would be the thing that can really check those boxes of the auditability, the tracing, figuring out what's going on where and when. And so there's still work to be done there, but I think that is a big opportunity as well to really hone in on bringing, again, a lot more of that standard set of tools for security and best practices, and giving those out of the box for these newer traditional companies.
Right. Okay. There's one line in the Surge release that I thought was interesting. You said today's Surge is a read-only product. Is there a future then in which Surge is a read and write product?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So this is something that we've gotten a lot of questions about, and that when you think about a good example is like ThunderHub. If you're familiar with ThunderHub, it is like this open source node management tool that gives you all of the access. You can see what's happening in the node, and you can also like perform actions on it and things like that. There's a lot of like issues in that method and that deployment that we kind of tried to solve in the Surge deployment. And so number one is that Surge is a time series service. And so everything that you can see inside of Surge can be tracked over time. So a lot of those other services are very point in time, where you can just see what are your channels right now, what are your balances right now, all of those things, where Surge is time series. So you can track your balances over time. You can see, was a channel offline last night when you were sleeping? If a customer is emailing you about payment failures, you can see, oh, this channel was offline during those times. Being able to see things over time is going to give people a big unlock to really see what is happening, not just right now, but over time. So that was an important call out. And so today, Surge is read-only, where our service, it only has read-only access into a node. We only just have view-only access to it, and that's the UI of Surge is all completely read-only. So that's how it works today, because it's very much made to be an operational tool. So it's just like a similar like to Datadog or New Relic or some of those like APM type solutions. They don't have write access into servers generally. They don't do a lot of those things. So we want to give that as a service that starts out of just, we want to make sure you have all of the data you can do to go and all of the data that you need to go and perform the services and the things that you need to do. And additionally, it really helps satisfy the requirements around like that, giving someone access to the data and what's happening without giving them full access to the node. There's a lot of people that want to give their finance team access to see what's happening inside of the node, but they don't want to give them the ability to like move funds or open up channels or do all of those different things. So separation of duties is very important. And so that's where we've started off by making it read-only. I say it's read-only today because there is a path forward where it could have some of that write capabilities, where maybe you can actually open up channels or move funds or do things like perform more actions on the node via Surge, which will very likely add some of that capability in, but then also being able to define roles and that where maybe that finance team should still have only that read-only access, but like some engineers in your team could have some additional form of access where they can do certain things. So it is read-only today. That could change over time. We're just kind of we're launching it as that because we think that is the best solution to go for today. Then we're going to be gathering feedback on what people want to see from there.
Right. And I know, I believe Surge was in beta for a little while, right? There was a subset of users that might have had access to this before. Any feedback you've generated from that, in that beta phase that you are now kind of like applying and tweaking in the product?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's been really really crazy to build this product because it's just there's so much uniqueness to data inside of Lightning and Bitcoin where there's transactions that maybe never get broadcasted. There's payments that just fail and like for just like no reason or seemingly no reason, and like the correlating data between specific things. Like there's just the data set inside of Lightning is just very vast and it's very unique and it's really hard to parse. So it took us a long time. A lot of that beta testing was like we want to make sure that the data is right. We want to make sure that what we're showing is actually the correct values, correct everything. And so that's a big part of it is making sure the data is accurate with this very very complex data set. So that was a big step. And then additionally, yes, there's a lot of feedback that we've gotten from users where they it's one of the best things about doing beta testing is they give us all of this great feedback that we're starting to incorporate now. So the biggest thing is alerting. So that's something that we're working on now that should be out fairly soon, is being able to alert you of, hey, your node went down, or hey, you have low liquidity in a specific channel, or your node stopped syncing to the chain. Like just things like that of operationally, how are things going, and what needing to know immediately, what are issues that you need to know about. Additional one is like being like viewing from that finance perspective, being able to like download your transactions, import them into QuickBooks or some other systems that the teams use. So there's a lot more there that can be done. So there's instead of that beta testing period, a lot of feedback and lots of things that we're going to be incorporating. And then there's also a lot of just validation and data consistency checking to make sure that things are the way that they should be.
Right. When I think about something like Surge, it almost feels to me like we're going from a phase where people are, if I like walk into a room without any lights on, it's like pitch black. I'm trying to feel around, figure out where I am, walk down the hallway, find doors and stuff like that. But it's really hard to know what I'm doing, and I have to go really, really slowly. And I never really get a really good picture of what's actually happening until I find the light switch and I turn it on and I realize, oh, here's what the room looks like. Here's all the doors I can go into. Is that a roughly like, is that the right way to look at Surge as a product? Like you're kind of illuminating the Lightning experience for new users?
Yes, yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. And like that's been again what we heard a lot from customers is being like there's so much that is unknown inside of Lightning, like inside of a node, and like what is happening for your given node. And so that's exactly what we want to do is like there's all these things of like why did X, Y, and Z happen, and we want to like find what those weird things are and just bring them to the surface. So it's just very obvious and it's not so moving around in the dark. And so yes, like that's a great analogy, and it's one that we're very focused on solving. In that there's so many unique pieces of data and like aspects of Lightning that we don't want it to be like again, everyone's learning this new language, this new service or whatever. We want to just make it obvious and give those recommendations, especially when we think about traditional fintechs. If they're getting this like routing error or something like that in their node, they might not like really understand that. They might need to take 2 hours to go and debug, like research, what is this, how do we fix it. Where if we can just say, hey, you got a routing error, this is probably the reason, this is what you can try to fix it, that's going to save people so much time. And that's going to be the big differentiator in people coming into Lightning or not coming into Lightning. If we have to teach every single person out there that wants to integrate it everything there is to know from ground zero to everything that they need to know, is they're not going to do it. So we need to give them these tools to really not be in the dark all the time.
Right. This kind of reminds me of a book I read about, it was about the history of Paris. And there was a segment in it talking about how lighting transformed the city. And, prior to street lamps, it was, as soon as it was dark, everyone just kind of went home. And if you were out on the street, you're at risk of a lot of crime. There's nothing fun to do because there's nowhere to go. You can't really see where you're going. But afterwards, the city kind of came to life, and it created all these new kind of like follow-on effects of, people now enjoying strolls down the main street after dark and all sorts of like exciting evening activities in the city. I'm curious to know what impact will this, illumination of lightning have on the Lightning Network itself? Are we going to see any structural changes in the way the Lightning Network works? Are we going to see, people make different decisions about how they allocate liquidity, who they connect to? What are your kind of, early views on how people might change their behavior when they have all this extra data?
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think I guess there's two parts of that. I think one is that people are going to be more efficient with their capital. I think to date, like people in Lightning have just open up channels anywhere. Some people kind of look closely at it, some people don't. But I think even the people that are trying to look closely, there's a lot of gaps. And so something that we have in Surge right now is like a view of your channels over time. But we also mark them as like online, offline, but also like online, but online but not used. So being able to show like, hey, this channel is online, it's fine, but like you're actually not routing any payments through it. You've never sent a payment through it. You've never received a payment. So it's kind of like just dead capital. And so being able to bring that to the forefront where, hey, maybe close that channel and redeploy that into a new area of the network. So I think that being able to give those insights into people so people can make more informed decisions rather than just trying to open up channels into random places. I think being able to surface a lot of that data will help a lot in having more useful capital deployments, because not only does that help a person that's maybe trying to earn some routing fees or whatever, it helps the network as a whole because they can very clearly see, hey, this is where the demand is, these are where payments are going, so we need to facilitate capital into those areas. And then the second piece is really helping and actually driving like true Lightning usage. So when I kind of described in my last answer on we are trying to make it so people don't have to be in the dark about all of these different, weird errors and data and everything inside of the Lightning node. I think, a comment that people would probably throw at that, like on Twitter or something, is like, well, just use a custodial solution. Like, you don't have to worry about any of that. Just go custodial. Well, and that's something that we're very focused on at Voltage, is being non-custodial, or like doing everything true to Bitcoin. So having real Lightning nodes, having real Lightning channels, everything is really there, and people can have the control over all of those aspects. And so this Surge is going to be a huge unlock in being able to enable that for more people. So it's not such this difficult thing for people to come and integrate Lightning and then they just end up going custodial the whole way. We want to give people a similar experience to like a custodial solution, but have them still have this true Lightning experience. And so I think it's going to help a lot in actually enabling people to use Lightning non-custodially, being able to run their own nodes, and being able to operate in a much more comfortable space than having this weird dark room like you mentioned. And so that's also an important call out, as like Surge is made for not only Voltage nodes, but also nodes that run outside of Voltage. So you can be running a node at home and plug it into Surge and get the same visibility. So ultimately, it's going to help people actually shift more into running their own nodes and actually participating in the network in a true fashion, which I think is going to be very important. It's going to be very nice for the network over time, where we see things like node growth and whatnot trending upwards. So I think that those are the two big unlocks that we see happening.
Very cool. So the number of nodes probably grows as a result, and then the efficiency that comes from knowing which channels are being utilized or not. Do you think then that leads to could it potentially lead to a decrease in capital being deployed on Lightning if people know, 20% of my channels aren't even being used? Maybe I just pull that off Lightning.
I guess I don't see it as a decrease of liquidity. I think it's more along the lines of people will just allocate it differently. I think that people would take that same million sat channel and just maybe put it in a different spot in the network than where it is. So I don't see it as necessarily decreasing the amount of liquidity. I think it's just focusing the liquidity that we have into the areas that it's needed.
Got it. Okay, I want to touch on an article that you just released. It's called "Every Company Will Be a Lightning Company." And first, before, if anyone has not had a chance to read it yet, can you just explain at a high level your thesis here and why every company will be a Lightning company?
Yeah. Yes. So I wrote this article. First off, it started as there's a presentation inside of Andreessen Horowitz that it's called "Every Company Will Be a FinTech Company," and it's a presentation that really breaks down how banking works today and how over time banking is going to be really decomposed into these different layers of services, and more just traditional, maybe non-fintech apps are going to become fintech companies by way of just being able to enable the services that these other companies provide. So, for an example, being able to do things like Uber, being able to have a balance inside of your Uber app, and being able to send payments out of Uber, or pay for Uber Eats or something like that via it, and actually being there's people that kind of live off Uber, and like some weird parts of the world where like they drive for a living and they use that mainly as their main kind of, maybe it's not as their main bank account, but they do a lot with that. And being able to add financial services into more and more businesses and applications are going to offer a better experience to the end user, because I think in their presentation it's like 26% of users actually trust their bank. So like it's a vast majority of people like actually don't trust their bank, they don't feel good about the money that's in there, all of those things. And so being able to decouple a lot of people's experiences with money from just a bank into keeping it more so into applications and services that you use, and then also more financial inclusion. If you can incorporate financial products into applications like Airbnb or something like that, you're able to offer more inclusion than actually having a Chase bank account or something like that. So there's I would honestly implore someone. It's like a 20-19 minute presentation. You almost should go and like watch that as a precursor, as a warm up into my article, which I took that. I basically agreed with a lot of the presentation. I took it a step further and I said if every company is going to be a fintech company, that's great, but Lightning is the superior payment technology. So if Lightning is the best payment technology that exists, every company will be a Lightning company, because as these people transition into fintech, they're going to realize, well, like if Lightning is the best tech, we're going to use that. And so my paper took it a step further of saying every company that is going to incorporate these financial tools is going to have to use Bitcoin and Lightning, because it's going to be the only way for them to truly compete. Especially when you think about Uber and whatnot, like the margins are usually not super high on a lot of these services, financial services on the retail level. And so being able to offer services for much cheaper and still having a decent margin on them is going to be very important, which is something that Lightning provides. So we can decompose more of the paper, but that's kind of the premise of it, is really focusing on bringing more financial tools into more and more applications, basically bringing finance to the edge, to the users, is something that is happening and I think will continue to happen. And when we do that, there's no better way of doing that than with Bitcoin and Lightning.
Right. I took a look at the Andreessen Horowitz paper and video that you linked in the article. But one thing that stuck out to me was I was curious about, and I've experienced this myself with banks. I am one of those people who does not trust their bank, and I wish I didn't have any money with them. And it was kind of like it's something I feel like it's the first thing I will stop doing when I have all the tools to stop doing it. I don't think it's quite there yet, but I'm looking forward to the day when I no longer need a bank. But I look at all these other companies, these fintech companies you mentioned, that have now kind of like integrated payments, or they have, now you can store a balance on these accounts. And I wonder why did that happen, in the last like 5-10 years? Why did that not happen at the advent of the internet? Was there any particular catalyst that led us to, other than just like general apathy and like not much excitement towards banks? What led to all these new apps popping up with fintech services?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of several things. I think it's from those services being enabled by startups that are actually creating the services that people like Uber and whoever can leverage, because they don't do it all themselves. They have like partners behind the scenes to do that. So I think enabling those, so people that are starting the companies to enable those services, because previously no one had a choice. It's just like the banks are there, the banks are the banks. Even at the start of the internet, I don't think that maybe like and on the onset, like finance was like the forefront the internet at that time. I mean, it kind of came shortly after, but early on, it was very focused on the information and all of that stuff. So I think that it was just not something that was maybe sought out at the forefront. And then as people continued on, I think that the default was like put your credit card in a website, like everyone, just like enter in these details like over and over again, that kind of thing. And so I think that as people developed out the tools to make it possible, and then I think as more people saw the painfulness of being able to connect into the traditional banking system, I think that opened up the door as well simultaneously of people being like, well, I would rather just keep this. I would rather have the user retention be higher because I can keep them in my app than having them have this frustration of connecting your bank account and like doing this in and out and all of these things. If I can just keep them in my app, I can increase the retention. I can give them a better experience. And I think that coupled with the actual services enabling it to be possible is what happened. And like in Andreessen Horowitz presentation, she talks about the massive need for like compliance people in a bank of like there's like 30,000 people out of like 120,000 or something. They're just compliance. They just are like validating the things. Now there's like companies that just do compliance. And so, Uber doesn't have to hire 30,000 people to do compliance. They just have a service. And so by enabling those things and coupling it with the ability for people to, once services have those financial instruments inside of their app, retention increases. People are staying in their app longer, and they can also reach more customers. Uber probably doesn't have to set up a bank in every single country that they enable in. They can do it in a much more streamlined way.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage empowers engineers to integrate Bitcoin and Lightning Network payments into their business stack with an enterprise-grade experience. The team at Voltage is building the complete toolset so that you can do more than simply spin up nodes, but also understand and interpret your node's data. Their new product, Surge, gives engineers the capability to quickly solve problems and optimize operations. With node insights and visibility through time series data, you get dynamic and complex insights never available before. You can get complete control with insanely fast onboarding, advanced client-side encryption, and zero management infrastructure, making backups, networking, and upgrades simple. Get a free 7-day trial today at voltage.cloud. Now, how important is interoperability in this equation? Because what I see is if I'm going from a world where I have all my money in a bank, and now there's a proliferation of fintech apps, I'm kind of splintering my money across different apps that don't necessarily all talk to one another. Mm-hmm. And Lightning may be that solution where they can all kind of converge again. How important is interoperability in transitioning from this like fintech world with all sorts of apps carrying tiny balances from users that may have many other apps with other balances, to all being able to talk to one another on Lightning?
Yeah, I mean that's the additional really big unlock is the interoperability of all of the products and services. So being able to just think about anyone that uses Venmo, when you transfer from Venmo to your bank account, it's like 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is. Like there's this like delay, and being able to cut down that delay, but then also be able to have a service that talks like. There's like Uber and Venmo. I don't know if they have a connection. I'm just kind of saying random apps, but like not every single app has a connection to another app, so they're not all interoperable. So you have to either go from Venmo to your bank account, then to Uber, or vice versa, or however it works. And so it's very disjointed in how everything is connected. When we think about incorporating the Lightning Network, it's all standard, a standard protocol. Everyone can communicate. If Uber implements Lightning, that means, and Airbnb does, and all these other services, they all just work. And so there's no additional plumbing or things that you need to do to tie in everything together. It just does it by using the technology itself. And there's no gatekeeper to the technology either. If you're thinking about, things like, ACH or Swift or some of the like the payment, networks, like there's opportunity for being like kicked off, or like you have to pay a certain fee to get added into the network, those kinds of things. there's nothing like that for Lightning. You can just instantly start using it. And so we see the inclusion, like the connectivity between all of these apps, increasing significantly, which also provides a better experience to the end user and ultimately. And so being able to have this connectivity is a much better experience. And then also you think about things like Starbucks rewards. It's like there's all these really niche things that are like, it only applies to Starbucks, Hilton rewards are only for Hilton, like all those things. There's no standard to that at all. And so if they were able to just add, sats as your reward for Starbucks or whatever, people actually can use that in a more real way. And then at that point, if the Starbucks app has sats in it instead of Starbucks points, you can check out at a different store with your Starbucks app. And you can use those in a much more native way. And so it gives people more optionality. I mean, there's the whole argument on, Starbucks wants to only use their points to keep people in their in their restaurant or their coffee shops and things like that. But I think that there's an element of if I was getting sats for Starbucks points that I could use elsewhere, I would be drinking Starbucks way more. I don't drink it at all today, but I would actually start going there more frequently because I'd be like, cool, I can actually earn real rewards that I can go and do things with elsewhere. And so it opens up a huge amount of possibility when you think about that too.
Yeah. I wonder what, I wish I could be inside the Starbucks meeting room where they made these decisions, but I wonder what role, different legislations in different countries played in that decision. Because with their Starbucks rewards, because they're just like, fake Starbucks points, they can just roll that out globally, right? Like it's their proprietary thing. It doesn't actually mean anything in terms of dollars, or it's not like a security. It's nothing, right? It's just Starbucks points. But you see apps like Cash App, which, I think for a while has planned a rollout around the world and has still kind of been stuck to the US. I've heard, I'm in Canada, and I've heard for many years Cash App was coming to Canada or is planning to be in Canada, and it just hasn't happened. And I think, I think they're trying to do it. I think it's just like a really challenging thing to go across borders when you're dealing with a fiat currency. So I wonder then if, maybe that's another value prop for companies, considering building out on Lightning, is now they can do this seamlessly without any restrictions around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it definitely opens you up globally, and like the people like Cash App, like there's probably still some licensing and setup that they need to do across the world. But if you think, even if like in that Starbucks app example, if they're doing sats, like they could even do it in a self custodial manner, and being able to do that where like you just Starbucks has nothing to do with users' balances at the end of the day for that. And so I think it does open you up to be able to go more global. And then again, it's like being able to, if I could imagine that being a reason for Starbucks to use, get Starbucks points, because they can, if they had to denominate in USD for across the world, well, shoot, how many countries have they in across the world? It's a lot. They're going to have to denominate in a lot of different currencies. And so Starbucks points make sense. It's just the thing. It's just the one thing. And so if we did the same thing with Sats and Bitcoin, I mean, I think that you can offer that similar globalization experience and not have to think through all of like the different like currencies and things like that exist and you have to deal with.
Yeah, so you can cut down on compliance, overhead, currency conversions, all the stuff that just comes along with rolling out globally. And then, of course, you have the interoperability component, which I think is huge. Now that you're able to connect to any other app. Now, I will say that I think the interoperability piece is much more important once there is a big company that has decided to really step up and go, Hilton turns on Sats rewards or Starbucks turns on Sats rewards. Then I think the interoperability piece becomes a lot more powerful because there's now this like global behemoth that is at an anchor, kind of like an anchor tenant in a mall, where you just know once you get them, you can attract all the other little retailers because you got Apple in your mall. It's like everyone else wants to be at that mall because they know it's going to be used.
Yeah.
What does it take to get that first big, anchor tenant using Sats as their kind of like in-app currency?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just ultimately in the beginning it takes like the believers, right? It's like I think MicroStrategy is a good example of it. Of they, Michael Saylor's done a good job of like educating the organization on what Bitcoin is, how it works, why it's important, and then they not only like set it up as like putting some of their money into it as a treasury asset, they're actually working on incorporating it into their product. And so I think that there's just going to have to be some people that are believers that are going to be digging into the experience of enabling this for their users. And then I think once we have just a couple people doing that and being able to really show data around how impactful that it has been, it's going to be enabled. More people are going to want to do it and go into it and all of those things. So I think that it takes some of those early believers. I think we're talking with some of those people that are very interested in being those, which is going to be exciting. And so I think we got to get a few people over the line, demonstrate it, show it that it's not so scary and that you can do it, and then we'll see more to follow.
Yeah. Are there any particular classes of companies that you think will be in that first cohort, those like first movers? Are we looking at, B2B companies like a MicroStrategy, B2C, any particular category? Are we looking at like e-commerce or, social apps? What's your sense for like who the first movers might actually be?
Yeah, well, I mean, we with Nostr coming online and things like that. I mean, like the social apps are. I mean, they're kind of coming. It's not like Twitter. It's like like Nostr and like Zion and some of those that are enabling it. So like it's good to see those coming online and then being able to hopefully use them as a proof point into more things happening there. So I think that's one. And I think the way that we see a lot of it happening today is a lot of people are using it. The way that we see people coming at it today is very much for like the efficiency gains that Lightning has. So people see that, hey, it's instant settlement, it's near zero transaction fees, and we want to enable that inside of our business. So people that have like 100 different banking relationships across the world in different places, they could use Bitcoin and Lightning to settle internally for their own uses. So I think that initially we're going to see a lot of it in kind of the internal backend systems for companies, mainly in like the maybe fintech banking sector. And then I think that we're going to continue to see it being pushed out to the edge. And so it's hard to say when we talk about actually enabling it on the end user who would be the most. I see rewards as being that big, like a B2C rewards function, as a big driver where I think that it could open up a lot of doors. In like the Starbucks points example, if there is an app that let you buy coffee and earn sats for it, like I think that people, and I think that Fold is a great example of that. The services like that say, hey, you can buy stuff and get Bitcoin rewards for it. Cool. Like that's awesome. Like people want that. And the more that we can enable into it, the better. So I think that that's going to be, I think B2C rewards is like more, I guess the retail rollout that I see.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone's done a study on this. Actually, probably not yet. But I think it'd be really interesting to see what those cost savings are for a business to transition from, building in traditional kind of like fintech capabilities to building on Lightning. Like what do you expect they might save in between compliance costs, overhead, all the currency conversions you mentioned, now not having the payment processing fees of like 2.9% on every transaction. You combine all the compliance salaries, all the folks who are dedicated to making sure these payment systems work and are in line with the regulatory requirements. If you take away all that money that a corporation might be spending and you translate that to the bottom line, what is that percentage different? Like, can you, what do you think you could realistically add to a corporation's bottom line? If you have a, 2% profit margin, can you double that, by swapping out your legacy payment rails and turning on Lightning payments?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question. It's a great point. I don't think there's been like a hard study on it, and really focusing on what does this mean. I think it would be very interesting to see because I do think it's substantial. I think that being able to leverage, like if you think just like so, for an example, like inside of the Swift network, to be able to even send a message to like from bank to bank to communicate about an upcoming payment, that costs money. It costs anywhere from like a cent to like 17 cents if it's going international, just to send a message about a payment. You can do that for free on Lightning today. You can send a message from peer to peer or like with one sat or something like that. And so you can really, when you think about just that one example of how many messages are sent over the Swift network every day, I don't know, it's going to be a lot. And if you take that from 17 cents to a fraction of a cent, that's a huge amount of savings right there. So I think that when we think about how does this apply, I mean, it is significant. I don't really have numbers, and I don't know if I'll feel comfortable throwing out like percentages or anything, but like you can just think about the impact because there is so much inefficiency and moats around the way that people do things today, that there's just the opportunity is insane to actually decrease a lot of the operational overhead that people experience today.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't even include one other aspect would be like fraud departments. There's fraud departments at some of these large companies that deal with a lot of payment volume, and it's like now you have instant settlement, and
Mm-hmm.
there's an entire part of your business that is maybe redundant. Um, Now, I want to highlight one thing in the article. You do say that there is no additional government licensing requirements today for transacting in Bitcoin, and I know that the crypto universe has been kind of riddled with some of these lawsuits and kind of like regulatory encroachment. I guess it seems like there's a lot of regulations coming down the pipeline there. It has not
Yep.
really affected a lot of Bitcoin companies yet. Do you believe that will be the case moving forward? Do you have some sense for like if regulations were to, be placed on Bitcoin companies, what those might look like, or how widespread they would be? I'd just love to hear more on the topic of regulations and whether or not that will be
Yeah.
a key consideration in Bitcoin moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be. I think the way that I mean, to date, it's been fairly, well suited in terms of like how do you kind of work with this. I think there's a lot of ambiguity still, but things have for the most part worked. I think that as we look through, so like right now, what's happening is like there's just a big kind of crackdown or SEC's trying to get their hands around what they view as securities and all of these things. I feel like there's um, and as you look forward, if you're dealing with a lot of those other chains, you're very likely to have to either one day create an additional license for this token or something like that, or have to register as this other type of business. Like you're going to get exposed to a lot more issues down the line than if you use Bitcoin, because the SEC has so far been very straightforward of like, this, we're not worried about Bitcoin. It is not this security that all of these other things are. And so I think that there's a pretty clear delineation between the two today. So I think it helps a lot in the folks that I think it's a big driver for people to go to Bitcoin, because why would you risk your business and what you're trying to do on integrating this other thing that you have no idea if it's going to be around tomorrow, or if you're going to have to, spend $3 million next month to get some license that has nothing to do with your business, or just be forced to just shut it down entirely. And so why would you not go with a thing that has the most security and assurance around it, which is Bitcoin? And so I think for that reason, we're going to see a lot more people really taking a step back and evaluating their strategy and figuring out, where do we want to enter this market at? And I think a lot of people are going to choose Bitcoin. So with that, and then additionally, like, today, the way that ultimately leveraging Bitcoin really decreases that overhead, like we were talking about in the compliance and fraud and all of these things. You can be much more compliant without having to do as much work with chargebacks and all of these different things. And so it gives a huge amount of opportunity in doing a lot more things. And so regulatory wise, who knows what's going to happen in the future. Today, businesses can be the businesses that they are, and be able to transact in Bitcoin, and then we'll see how things go from here. But I think that overall there's going to be a big separation in the cryptocurrency space between Bitcoin and all of these other things that is ultimately going to pose well for our space. I'm hopeful for that, and I mean it's a hot topic these days.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. I think there's a clear delineation happening. In security seems to be the line that is drawn in the sand here, and the split is around that issue today. Um, Now, I'm also thinking about a future where money transmitting is a hot topic. It's not a
Hmm.
hot topic today yet in Lightning. Maybe the volumes aren't big enough to attract the attention of U.S. regulators, but um, money transmitting licenses are a thing. Uh, Bitcoin is money. Is there a concern there that a regulatory push could, limit Lightning adoption, even if only for a short period of time? Because I know there are some services that are, there's custodial services that are passing along payments, that are, holding funds, that are interacting with U.S. users. U.S. being like typically like the hotspot for financial enforcement and regulations. And so, I wonder what impact do you think, if any, money transmitting rules could have on adoption of Lightning?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it really just depends on how it plays out and like where those get applied to. I think ultimately, there's it's yeah, I think it just really depends on like how like is it that like every Lightning node operator out there is a money transmitter, or do you if you're routing payments, are you a money transmitter, or if you're just sending and receiving payments, you're fine. And so I think that it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in terms of I have my own opinions on it, but like I'm not the one making the rules and the laws, so it only goes so far. But I think that the Lightning Network will always be able to function regardless, and so maybe it alters the state of like the way that it works and the way that like the network's set up. Maybe it's way more hub and spoke than it is today, things like that. So I think that it could it that's the way that I would see it going if that was how the service operated. So yeah, so I think that it just really depends on the rules and like how they write them out and like what is allowed and what isn't. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get some sensible solutions in there where it's not so overarching. I don't think that there's something that would absolutely kill the network or anything like that. I think that we'll be able to really function in the capacity that makes sense, but it really just depends on how they approach it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen a number of large enterprises that have recently joined Lightning, at least one, maybe a couple, that are concerned about connecting to unverified nodes, or just, I think, out of an
Hmm.
abundance of caution, taking the approach of, we're going to only connect to nodes that we can vet, we personally know them, we know maybe they are regulated themselves. Do you think that we get into a position where large enterprises take that approach, and hobbyists running their own kind of nodes in the background are kind of like relegated to a separate subgraph of the network? How do you think
Hmm.
that plays out?
Yeah, I can't remember who said it first. Maybe it was Matt Odell or someone. But like there's like an idea of like there will be two Lightning networks of like this super regulated. It's just like exchange to exchange. It's like every payments KYC whatever. Of uber regulated Lightning network, and then there's like the more less regulated network, more like pleb focused, just people operating doing payments to each other. And so I think that there's like there's some validity to that. And like it could totally like as we see today with people like Binance is standing up a node right now and they're only opening up channels into other exchanges. They probably have some kind of agreement with them too. And so I think that will continue. I think there will be people that continue to do things like that. But I also think that there's that sort of network can be interoperable with the greater network, like if there's like a single channel between these two networks, it's all interoperable at the same time too. So I think that there is some element of that separation where like maybe Binance never connects into a person that they don't know, and that's fine. But I think that the network will still function, and end users will still be able to like operate and do their thing just the same. So there will probably be a little bit more separation, but I don't think that it'll be a bad thing or something that kind of hurts the network at all.
Is there a threshold at which it could be a degrading experience for non-verified nodes? We look at like Bitcoin on chain, and there's a threshold for hash rate that we're all very well aware of 51%. On
Mm-hmm.
Lightning, I believe exchanges are already over 50% of public hash rate combined. And I don't think that's the necessarily a relevant number on Lightning, but is there a threshold at, if you get to 80, 90, 95% of, maybe it's of liquidity, of number of channels, is there a point at which the folks who are not verified, let's say, now have a degraded experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. And like, no, there really isn't. And because like Lightning is strictly peer to peer. So like if 90% of the network is made up of these like large exchanges or something like that, me, you, and a friend could create a channel between us three, and we can transact and send our own payments as much as we want, and without ever touching the exchanges. So like it's less of a percent, like like a 51% or something like that. It's just more of the more that those nodes kind of come up and take as far as like capacity and channels, like maybe it's harder to route payments because you're getting denied because your node isn't on like their whitelist or whatever. But at that same time, you could open up a channel into someone else. Like there could be an entire network of underground node runners, and they operate their own network entirely fine. And so there's not it's not like a strict percentage of like at this percent we can censor most payments. Maybe there is something like that, but it doesn't mean that you could never, like in layer one, that means like you could if most of it is censored, like you can't get into the block, basically. You're just not allowed. Where in Lightning, if almost every payment's being censored or blocked, you can go and create your own path. Because Lightning at the end of the day is just a 2 of 2 multi-sig, between two parties in the payment channel. And so you can do that as long as you're not being censored on layer one, but you can do that just the same. So there's not really a hard limit.
Right. And I guess as long as fees remain somewhat reasonable, that opportunity will continue to exist for folks to run their own nodes. Like I wonder also about a future in which, the cost to open a channel is $5,000 or something. If we get to a situation like that, then all of a sudden it's like you're now kind of forced to kind of pursue either custodial options or use the kind of apps you have on your phone, and not you're not building out your own your own Lightning Network node with $25,000 to set up 5 channels.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, yeah, and I think that I'm hopeful. I mean, like by the time we reach a spot where we're at a $5,000 for an on-chain payment or something like that, I think that we'll be at a different spot entirely in Lightning, where like maybe there's a much super more efficient ways of opening channels, or doing much more efficient batching and things like that. I think that when we get to that point, there will be the ability for more technology improvements along the same line. So maybe there's ways that we can decrease that cost or share it or something like that. So I think that I'm hopeful that we have wiggle room in terms of like how do we keep up with those kinds of things.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I want to do a little Lightning Network review now, because we had our first conversation about 18 months ago. And in it, we had I asked about a couple of different metrics in Lightning, and, asked for you to think about what that might look like in a few years. And I think one of the big ones was the number of nodes. I asked, how many nodes are going to be on the Lightning Network in 2025, I think I said. And at the time there was, 19,300. We've actually gone down to about 18,000 now. Your initial prediction was about 100,000. And I actually said in response, I think that might be a little low. I said, I think over 100,000. And so what I want to do here is, on a few different metrics, I have 6 or 7 different kind of verticals within Lightning that I'd love to hear your feedback on, and just like riffing on the development you've seen in a particular vertical or metric over the last year and a half. And, have things exceeded your expectations or fallen short of them? The first one we can start with is the number of Lightning nodes. Watching this kind of chart over the last year and a half, having been up at 19,300, I think there was a drop off maybe related to an LND bug, I think I want to say in November. And then I think it's been a steady uptick since then, but we're still only at about 18,000. What's your sentiment on the number of people running their own Lightning nodes, how that's changed over the last couple of years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's been super interesting, and I can't remember exactly how I answered it the last time, but I think that I think that the number of nodes is going to continue to increase. I think that we've seen somewhat of a drawback. I mean, from I don't know if it's from the bug or just for whatever reason. I mean, I think that there are some stale nodes out there that just really hadn't been used in a while, and so I think ultimately we are going to increase, especially when a lot of the things that we're working on and trying to do, I think that will enable much more a better proliferation of nodes across the network that are much easier and not because I think so. When you think about it today, like the 18,000 nodes that exist today are all a mix of I guess the state of the Lightning today, which is a mix of Umbrel, like Start Nines, all those things. There's people like Voltage, there's custodians, there's all these different things, but it's very sort of boxed in how you operate a node. I think that the ways that you can be a node on the network is going to be diversified over time. So you think about mobile wallets and all of those things. Maybe mobile wallets don't show up in that 19,000 node count because they're not gossiping and all of those things. So I think that there's obviously way more nodes out there today than the 19,000, 18,000 number. They're just not announced, and I think that will certainly continue over time. I think that there will be tons and tons of these nodes that are only seen by certain people or kind of know on an app developer how many users do they have. Well, if they have 10,000 users, that's 10,000 Lightning nodes that don't show up in that 19,000 count or something like that. So I think ultimately the ways in which nodes are ran are going to be diversified over time. And I think that is going to help drive that number up continually. And so I think that there's still significant room for that to improve, and I think that it's hard as well, because this is something that I say often, is that being able to track the trends of the Lightning Network are very hard with the number of nodes, channel count, channel capacity. Those aren't good metrics, honestly, to track the network and being successful or not successful. But it's all that we have given the privacy of the Lightning Network, which is great. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
100%. That's actually why I spend so much time trying to build out these little charts and stats. And anytime I can get my hands on metrics that companies are willing to share or release, I try and compile that as much as I can, share it with folks, because I know the amount of data we have to look at is limited. And the number of Lightning nodes, you're right, we're looking at a subset. We're not looking at every single Lightning node. Same with the next question I have is for a number of Lightning channels. And again, this is going to be public channels. But I've noticed over the last year that number of channels has actually slightly decreased as the number of Lightning nodes has slightly increased. So this would be from January onwards, I guess, from this year. Mm-hmm. The number of nodes on the network has actually steadily increased from 17 up to 18,000. The number of channels has slightly decreased. I'd love to hear your thoughts on why that might be and whether or not you think more channels per node or fewer channels per node will persist into the future.
Yeah, well, I think while we're on the topic, because you probably have it in front of you, do you know what the channel capacity has done over the same amount of time? I think capacity's increased, right?
Yeah, it's increased slightly. It's bumped up against 5,600 a couple of times. Uh-huh. It bumped up against it a few months ago. It pulled back to 54, 55, and now we're right up against 5,600 Bitcoin again.
Yeah. So that kind of correlates to my answer of, I think that with channel count decreasing, I think that it's just more people deploying capital more efficiently, knowing more where to deploy it at. And I think a lot of the decrease in number of channels is people closing, older channels or things that are just not worth tying up idle capital into, because when you create a channel, I mean, your funds are locked into that channel until you close it. And so I think that there's been a lot of, especially in current mempool states too, of higher fee environment, where if you don't have capacity, liquidity in the right place, it could be more problemsome, more of an issue for you than otherwise. So I think that we see a lot of people reallocating capital into the desired areas that make a lot more sense. So I think that that's what we see a lot of is people are just moving capital around and making it putting it into the right spots, because there was also a time, like, probably about the time we did our last podcast or something. I think the mempool was like probably 1 sat per vbyte, and it was for a really long time, and so people are just kind of opening up channels that were like 20,000, 50,000 sat channels, which doesn't make a lot of sense today. And so I think people are really kind of adjusting, like, oh, I probably shouldn't be just opening these super small channels all over the place. I need to be more. I need to close these 10 micro channels and make one big channel, because it's gonna make more sense for me as an operator, or as as a person that's just trying to make payments. So I feel like it's just a shift in how people are using it, and a shift that might be a good one in allocating capital in a more sensible way.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Just a quick message from our sponsor, Stackwork. Stackwork is a Lightning-powered platform for generating high-quality transcripts of all your audio or video content. They combine AI engines and hundreds of human workers all over the world who are paid over the Lightning Network to assemble these transcripts. And that's what lets Stackwork create better, faster, and less expensive transcripts. To see the results for yourself, you can check out my personal website where I host transcripts for all my podcast episodes. If you want to learn more about Stackwork, visit stackwork.com. That is STAK work.com. Now let's talk about the payment success rate on Lightning. Maybe you have better visibility into this than most, but talk to me about where you think payment success rate has shifted in the last year or two. Have payments significantly improved in that time? I think actually in our last conversation, we talked about how when you first got into Lightning, and you're talking back in like 2018, 2019, you were almost like concerned. Every time you sent a payment, you were like, is this one going to go through or not? And now, we got to a point where it was like, pretty consistently going through. But in the last year or two, have you noticed a shift, in I know that the amounts of payments that are failing is probably now so small, but are you seeing any changes in the success rate of payments across the network?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, from our perspective, and from customers that we work with, we are seeing an increase in success. I think that I do have less of that worry as I send payments now than I did then, so that's good. And so yes, I think that payment success has definitely improved, especially when things like multipath payments and things like that have definitely helped. And I think that we have seen more success of payments so far. I think that there's several people that have kind of posted information about like their success rates and things like that, and they all across the board seem to definitely be improving. So I think that we've gotten into a pretty good spot, and I think it's also going back to my previous answer on like capital allocation, where people are understanding like the ways that liquidity works inside of the network with channel reserves and all these different things. And so being able to use your capital more efficiently helps make the payment success rates better. And so I think that we're seeing better capital deployments, which leads to better payment success rates. So I think overall, we have definitely seen an increase in success. I think that will continue. And I think that that's also going to continue with things like, so the LSP that we're creating, our like Flow 2.0, is an LSP that's focused on just-in-time liquidity. And so what that means is we're able to detect when a payment is coming to the destination and automatically zero conf open a channel to that destination if they don't have the liquidity for it already. And so that helps significantly of like our super well connected node that has channels, all over the place, being able to service these, maybe someone that doesn't have good liquidity. And so you still, that will facilitate a successful payment that would have otherwise failed. So I think that there's a lot more that we're going to do to also increase that number. So I think that the future is bright for successful payments.
Interesting. How about routing fees? I want to hear your thoughts on, I know we've had a big mempool spike in fees in the last couple of months. I want to hear your thoughts on, are Lightning nodes earning more in routing fees? Is that potentially a path towards building a sustainable business if someone chooses to build a a node specifically for routing? How have Lightning routing fees changed over the last year or two?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think that they've gotten better over time. I wouldn't say that fees are high enough today where you can make like run a sustainable business on it or something like that. I think we have a little ways to go there, but I think we've definitely seen we've seen a lot of interest in this area, especially from like people inside of like the mining sector or people that are just have large amounts of Bitcoin in treasury or something where that capital is going to sit regardless whether it's in a lightning channel or in their cold storage. And so we see a lot of people being very interested in allocating a percent of like a corporate treasury into a lightning node and trying to earn routing fees and things like that on it. And so there's definitely possibilities today, especially like Lightning Labs released like an auto fees setting in their like terminal product. I don't know, it was a couple weeks ago or something, and we've been kind of playing around with it, and it seems to do fairly well in like generating some routing fees and things like that. So I think that we're still a little early in like routing fees being a massive market. But I think that we're definitely coming to the cusp of that, especially when we think about the LSP that I mentioned last time, and being able to enable people to tie into that and like earn fees from like also from servicing people inside of the LSP as well as the routing fees. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for earning return on capital deployed in the Light Network that is going to evolve over time too. So I think to finalize, I think that it's definitely we're early a little bit still, but there's a lot of potential to come, I think, in that area.
Interesting. How about Lightning UX? Talk to me about the changes you've seen in as a user of Lightning products and services. What changes are you seeing in the last year or two, and just how easy it is to use Lightning?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely been getting easier. I mean, which is great. Like that's where we need to focus. And so, with things like what we've because like and when you think about Lightning UX, like there's a lot of different personas in that of like UX of like operating a node and like being a business and adding it into your payments and all those things. And then there's the UX of like the consumer of someone having a Lightning mobile app and being able to send and receive. I think the UX of like sort of the infrastructure side has definitely increased. That's where we're heavily focused. And so things like Surge and our LSP and our nodes and all those things are very focused on making that the UX of operating nodes very easy. And I think that we've done a lot with that. We're going to do a lot more with that. And so the UX on that is definitely improving. I think similarly on the end user level is definitely increasing as well. I think LDK has done a great job of really enabling a lot of new use cases or at least new experiences inside of like the mobile app like space. So think about Mutiny, for example. It's a newer wallet a newer wallet for specifically in like the mobile context, or that you can even use it in a browser. And so being able to send and receive Lightning inside of that, which uses our LSP, has been very good. I mean, I've been using it, and it actually has very few failures. You can receive a payment instantly. You can send a payment. It works very, very well. And so it's been there's a lot to go, I think, in that realm. But I think that we're doing a lot from like that end user experience level. And I think that a lot of it comes from things like LDK and those services being built out to really make it a nice experience.
Awesome. And then what about the number of businesses integrating Lightning? Have you been impressed or concerned about the demand from businesses outside of the Bitcoin space coming into Lightning in the last year or two? What's your sentiment there?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen there's definitely a large amount of like increase in people from like outside of Bitcoin coming into the Lightning space. So we've definitely seen an increase in that. I would say that it's still a little early in those. There's a lot of people that are trying to figure out what their Lightning strategy is, how can they apply it, what do they do about it, those kinds of things. So I think over the next year or so, we'll see a significant amount of like new Lightning companies. I think that there's a large amount of people building new companies that are focused like on Bitcoin. So like from like the Wolf Accelerator and things like that. I think that is going very, very well. A lot of people building new applications and services inside of Bitcoin and Lightning. So that's going very well. I think from the other side of like, maybe traditional companies and things like that, being able to come in and use Bitcoin and Lightning and incorporate in their products. We're seeing that very early. But there's a lot of people that are very interested in developing their strategies now. So I think we're going to see that increase over the next 12 months.
Cool. All right, let's finish this off with the lightning round. I do this at the end of every show. Got a few rapid fire questions for you. Ready?
All right. Yeah.
Okay, if you could only hold one asset for the next decade and it could not be Bitcoin, what asset would it be?
Ooh, ammunition, gun shell. Yeah, all kinds of ammunition.
Interesting. I like
Because
it.
I mean, it's I think it, if something needs to be, it is used today, and it will only increase in usage over time. I feel like.
Interesting. Yeah. Is there any book that has changed your view of the world?
Changed my view of the world. Gosh, I don't know. I know. I think that I guess there's a book called Living Fearless that I have recently read that has helped my view of the world a lot. It's a Christian book, so like I'm a believer, and I do a lot of reading on those things. So Living Fearless by Jamie Winship was an incredible book. So I'll call that one out because it did help a lot.
Very cool. If you could change one thing about the Lightning Network, what would it be?
I think the liquidity requirements are a challenge, and I think that they will increasingly be a challenge that we have to work around. And so, if like things like ARC are interesting because it's less of an end user liquidity requirement. There's trade-offs to that, but I think that would be something that would be, if I had a magic wand. It's there for a reason. It exists for a reason. But if I had a magic wand, I think that would be it.
Interesting. And then finally, who's one person in the Bitcoin or Lightning ecosystem that you'd like to give a shout out to for doing great work?
That's a good one. I think last time I might have did Ollie from Lightning Labs. I think this time I'll do I think Tony and Paul, both from Mutiny. They're doing a great job. They were previously working at Voltage, and then they started Mutiny, and I think that they've been doing a great job and really focusing on the end user UX and making a really nice experience. So I will shout out those guys.
Love it.
And Ben Carmen, sorry, like Ben's on that team too, but I Tony and Paul kind of like were working with me before, so.
Fair enough, yeah. And we've had Ben on. I think Ben was on maybe episode 89. I want to say, but just to finish this off for listeners, where can they go to learn more about you and Voltage?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter. So my Twitter is at GKRIZEK. Our company account is at voltage_cloud on Twitter. Our website is voltage.cloud. So just, go to our website, find out more. Definitely reach out to me or the team if you're interested in doing anything with Lightning, or you want to check out some of the new products that we're working on. Definitely reach out, and we are happy to help.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the time. Hope we can do it again soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
In the last 30 days, you guys sent in 53,453 sats, and that came in from 32 different supporters. Massive shout out to everyone who's been contributing. It means a lot. And I have a new dashboard that I'm testing on Fountain to see all the activity and the comments you guys are sending in. Let's run through some of the comments from the last week or so from episode 110 with Paul West. We had BRND who sent in 100 sats and said, love Bitcoin miner. Blockchain Boog sent 5,000 sats and said, I'm a Bitcoin miner. Really fun game. And Rysard also commented, such a great game. It gets repetitive, but it's still worth the sats. This is all in response to episode 110 with Paul West, who runs FUM Games, and their hit game is called Bitcoin Miner. Ghostly Thing also sent in a comment on one of my past clips and said, can you tell me the name of the app, or is it only an idea on the clip I made about earning Bitcoin helps people walk more? This is from a previous episode I did with Smiles. I believe this was episode 10 or 11 of the show. So this is a few years ago, or a year and a half ago, I guess. And yes, Ghostly Thing, the name of the app is Smiles. You can earn Bitcoin. I believe it's up to 21 sats a day for walking. Pretty cool idea. That's all for today, but thank you again to everyone who's been sending in sats. And I can't wait to see what you guys send in this week.